There are truths that aren't shouted out loud, but when kept quiet for too long, they start to tear you up inside. One of them is this. The respect of an adult child doesn't vanish all at once. It fades with every confession you should have never made, with every word you spoke hoping for closeness and finding only judgment. Maybe you believed that opening up completely was an act of love, that by sharing your fears, your mistakes, your loneliness, they'd understand you better. But sometimes, what you reveal with a bare heart becomes a weapon in the hands of someone who no longer sees you through the eyes of childhood, but with the harshness of someone who never truly grew up. This video isn't meant to justify distance or place blame. It's meant to bring clarity, to help you recognize which truths, painful as they may be, are better left unspoken. Because some things, once said, don't inspire respect, they stir up pity. And you weren't born to beg for understanding. Today I'm going to share 9 secrets you should never tell your children in old age, even when the silence feels unbearable. And believe me, the last one might be the line between reclaiming your dignity or fading into oblivion. I'm Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. Stay with me until the end. Some truths aren't here to comfort you, but to wake you up. Have you ever felt exposed in front of someone who knows how to look at you with tenderness anymore? Have you ever spoken from the depths of your soul, only to watch your words fall flat, as if they meant nothing? Most older mothers have lived that moment, opening their hearts to an adult child, hoping for understanding, and receiving instead distance, discomfort, or judgment. It's brutal, but it happens. And as painful as it is, it must be said clearly. When you confess your deepest fears to your child, especially at this stage of life, you're often not building closeness, you're losing respect. This is the first point we're going to explore today. Don't share your deepest fears with your children, no matter how much they hurt. Because as contradictory as it may seem, there are truths that shouldn't be shared with those who lack the maturity to hold them. Not all children become a safe place. Some, even if they share your blood, become strangers in the face of your vulnerability. Take a moment and think about this. How many times have you spoken from a wound, hoping for comfort? How many times have you said, "I feel lonely. I'm afraid of getting sick. I don't know what I'd do without you," hoping for a hug or a steady word, and got only silence, avoidance, or a quick change of subject? The hardest part is that those confessions aren't always received the way you expect. Sometimes your child sees them as a burden, other times as a sign of weakness, and often simply as something they don't know how to handle. Imagine an ancient temple built with stones that have stood for centuries. That temple is you. But one day, you decide to tear down part of its walls to show someone what's inside, thinking it will strengthen your bond. You do it with love. You do it with trust. But if the person walking in doesn't have respect, they won't see it as a gesture of openness. They'll see ruins. They won't value your story. They won't understand your gesture. And you're left with a wounded temple and a soul laid bare. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Be careful what you share with those who haven't learned to look with compassion." Maybe not in those exact words, but that's the message. Compassion isn't instinctive. Not every child, just by being your child, will know how to hold you up when you show them the tremble in your voice as you speak about the future. Not all of them understand that behind your fear lie years of sacrifice, effort, and unconditional love. This doesn't mean you need to become cold or closed off. It's not about hardening. It's about protecting your dignity. Old age isn't the time to become transparent to everyone. It's the time to discern who's worthy of seeing your cracks and who isn't. Your fears don't make you weak, but handing them over carelessly can leave you exposed. There's a prayer many older women repeat in silence. "Lord, give me strength not to fall apart when no one is there to hold me." That strength is what you must nurture now. Because even though the need to share your fears is real, There are safer places to do it. A journal, a quiet walk, a deep prayer, even a conversation with someone who doesn't want to fix your life, but is willing to listen without judgment. That's wisdom. That's stoicism in practice. Remember this. Respect can't be demanded, but it can be eroded when you bare yourself to those who aren't looking at you with mature love. Staying silent about your pain isn't cowardice. It's prudence. It's dignity. And it's also a way of teaching others that your soul isn't available to just anyone, even if they're your child. There's still much more to say. And what's coming next will confront you with another one of those truths no one ever told you. But that could set you free if you're willing to hear it. Stay with me. This is just the beginning. A moment ago, we talked about the fears you should never confess, no matter how much they hurt. But now, we need to go deeper. Because it's not just dangerous to hand over your fears to someone who can't hold them, it's also destructive to explain how much you need their attention. This brings us to the second key point of this video. Don't explain how much you need their attention, because every time you do, you fade a little more in their eyes. It's understandable why you might do it. After all, you gave them everything for years. You were there through their falls, their triumphs, their silences, and when old age arrives, it feels only fair to expect a bit of that attention in return. But the issue isn't in wanting it. The issue begins when you start asking for it from a place of lack, from desperation. When you begin to explain that their absence hurts, that not hearing from them breaks you, that you miss a call or a visit, hoping they'll understand, reflect, give back something of what you once gave. And yet, they don't. Or if they do, it's with no heart, out of obligation, rushed. And that's where the wound opens, realizing that no matter how much you explain or express your pain, nothing changes. Because in truth, respect and presence can't be begged for. They're inspired. And when a child no longer respects you, explaining how much you need them only widens the gap. Marcus Aurelius wrote that one should never beg for what life is unwilling to give, because begging wears you down, humiliates you, and often doesn't change a thing. And you weren't created to spend your final years justifying your need for love. Yes, you're a mother, but you're also a woman, a soul, a consciousness. And the dignity you carry isn't something to be bargained away with gentle words aimed at someone who no longer wants to listen. When you explain how much you need them, something breaks in the relationship. They stop seeing you as the strong figure who once held them up, and instead see someone reaching out to fill a void. And that image, rather than drawing them closer, makes them uncomfortable, because a child who hasn't yet found their own path doesn't know what to do with a mother who needs them. They prefer to pull away, shut down, justify their distance with busyness, or by saying you're overreacting, and you're left waiting for another call, another visit, another gesture that never comes. The result is brutal. You're not just lonely, you start to believe that loneliness is your fault, that maybe you said too much, asked for too much affection, were too intense, and so you begin to go silent, but with bitterness, with a sadness that settles into your body like an invisible illness. Your health suffers, your spirit dims, and you start to see old age as a punishment instead of a new beginning. But this is where Stoicism steps in, not as a theory, but as a way of life. Epictetus taught us that what we control is our reaction, not others' behavior, and in this case, your strength lies in no longer explaining what should be obvious. In accepting that if someone can't see your worth, they won't see it even if you give them 1,000 reasons. Your mission isn't to convince, it's to affirm yourself, to affirm your dignity with a silence that doesn't beg, with a presence that doesn't seek approval. Love doesn't disappear just because you stop asking for attention. On the contrary, it begins to rebuild when you direct it inward. when instead of saying, "It hurts that you don't call," you say silently, "I'm here, whole, even if you don't show up." Because the woman who stops begging for attention begins to regain the respect she lost without knowing when. And that, more than anything else, is what you need now: real respect. Not cheap comfort, not forced presence, real respect. Spirituality also reminds us that there's a kind of companionship that goes beyond flesh and blood. That some silences embrace you more deeply than certain words, and that when you feel seen by life, by God, by your own soul, solitude stops being a punishment and becomes sacred space. That's where you need to speak to yourself from now, not from emptiness, but from the firmness of someone who chooses never to beg again. And if you've made it this far, listen closely. It's not too late to reclaim that posture. No matter how much you've explained before, today you can choose silence with dignity. Today you can return to yourself, because the woman who respects herself stops pleading, and the one who stops pleading becomes strong again, even in solitude. Get ready, because the next point goes even deeper. Don't go anywhere. Clarity is just beginning. We've already talked about the danger of explaining how much you need those who no longer listen. But there's an even deeper trap that many older women fall into without realizing it, one that slowly erodes the respect their children once had for them. We've arrived at the third point in this video, and this is where things start to shift. Don't tell them how much you sacrifice for them, because even if it feels fair, even if it feels necessary, that phrase, spoken from pain, can be the very thing that pushes them further away instead of bringing them closer. For years, you gave everything: sleepless nights, skipped meals, exhausting jobs, hard decisions. You did it out of love, without asking for anything in return. But there comes a time when that love doesn't come back, not in the way you hoped. And so, the temptation arises to remind them of your sacrifice. Everything I did for you, and look how you treat me. But those words, said from exhaustion or frustration, don't create awareness in someone who doesn't want to see it. They only trigger guilt, and guilt doesn't build respect. It creates distance, rejection, discomfort. The child who hears that phrase shuts down. They don't feel moved, they feel defensive. Stoicism teaches us not to cling to rewards. Seneca said that the wise do what's right, not because they expect something in return, but because it is in their nature. And you, who gave so much, did it because it came from your heart, because you felt it was your duty, your highest expression of love. But using that past as an argument today only weakens your presence, because sacrifice, when used as currency, becomes a debt. And no one respects someone who collects emotional debt, even if it's justified. There's a far more powerful strategy than reminding others of what you gave. Start honoring what you can still give to yourself. Instead of looking back to explain your devotion, look at yourself now and ask, what can I do for me today that doesn't depend on them? Because when the focus returns to you, so does the respect, not from them, but from you to yourself. And that changes everything. You're no longer the mother begging for recognition. You're the woman who recognizes herself. Think of it this way. A flower doesn't explain to the sun how much water it had to absorb to grow. It simply blooms. And in blooming, it commands respect. You can do the same. Stop counting how many roots you laid down and start showing the flowers you can still offer, even if now you bloom alone. If these words are making you reflect, if you feel you're finding direction where there was only exhaustion before, I invite you to subscribe and give the video a like. That way, we can keep building this space together without masks, without empty phrases. Tell me in the comments what country you're watching from, and if this message speaks to your soul, just write, "I don't beg for recognition." I'd love to read your words and know we're walking the same path, with strength and clarity. There are still lessons ahead that could transform your relationship with others and with yourself. And believe me, the last one might just be the turning point you've been waiting for. Stay with me. There's still so much to uncover. When we stop begging for recognition, we begin to take a much more dignified stance toward life. But even from that stance, there are traps, quiet, dangerous ones, that still linger. One of the most common is triggered the moment an unexpected bill arrives, a financial burden appears, or money runs short. That's when many women cross a line that seems harmless, but carries deep consequences. The fourth point we need to explore today is this. Don't talk to your children about your financial problems unless you're ready to set clear boundaries, because opening that door without limits can be the beginning of a relationship based on pity, dependency, and mistrust. It's an easy mistake to make. You're worried, you feel alone, and money starts to run low. Your pension isn't enough, your health demands more care, and your hands don't work like they used to. So you decide to share that burden with your children. But you do it from a place of anxiety, hoping for help, understanding, or at least empathy. And maybe at first you get it. But if you don't draw the line from the start, that help turns into control, into veiled judgment, into comments that hurt more than they help. Because the problem isn't talking about money. The problem is doing so without knowing how far you're willing to go, without deciding whether the conversation is an act of trust or a surrender. Because once you open the door to your finances, some children will feel entitled to comment on your choices, dictate how you live, or make you feel guilty for every purchase they don't approve of. And just like that, you lose your autonomy without realizing it. You no longer buy what you want. You buy what won't upset them. You no longer make decisions for yourself. You make them based on what they'll think of you. This happens because fear disguises itself as honesty. You say, I just want them to know how I'm doing, when in truth what you're saying is, I need them to save me. And that idea, that seed, takes root in your mind like poison. You begin to see money not as a tool, but as a mirror reflecting your vulnerability. You feel lesser for needing help. And worse, you start to be grateful for help that doesn't come from love, but from duty or superiority. Stoicism is clear on this. Epictetus reminds us that what matters isn't having much, but needing little. But that philosophy isn't about living in lack. It's about understanding that your worth isn't measured by what you have or by what others give. Your worth lies in your ability to stand tall, even when life is hard. And if you do decide to ask for help, let it come from clarity, not desperation. From the strength of someone who knows who she is, not the guilt of someone afraid to be a burden. If you don't draw the line, you'll soon find yourself in a dynamic where every favor has a hidden price, a forced silence, a visit with conditions, an unspoken opinion held back out of fear they'll stop helping. And that, more than poverty, is what truly impoverishes your spirit. Because needing something is one thing. But losing your freedom because you didn't know when to stay silent or when to say, this is mine, even if it's not much, is something else entirely. That's why, if you're going to talk to your children about your finances, do it as someone sharing information, not handing over control. And if you're not sure you can maintain your independence, do the inner work first. Decide what you're willing to accept and what you're not. Because a mother who knows how to set boundaries, even financial ones, teaches something money can't buy: respect. And that respect is what will protect your peace when the rest of the world starts to look the other way. This isn't about pride, it's about identity, about not letting the fear of emptiness fill your life with contaminated relationships. A woman who sets limits when she shares her vulnerability doesn't lose her dignity, she affirms it. Stay with me, because what's coming could change the way you experience your relationships even more deeply. There are still truths we haven't touched, and the last one will be the strongest of them all. We've already walked through some painful but necessary truths, and now we come to the fifth, one that often goes unnoticed because it seems harmless, yet it's a deep crack in the soul. Don't tell them you feel lonely. It might sound contradictory, even unfair. How can you not share that sadness with the ones who should care about you? How can you not tell your child that you miss them, that their absence weighs on you, that the days stretch endlessly when no one calls? The answer is simple, even if it hurts. Because saying it, when the other person isn't ready to respond with mature love, doesn't heal. It drains you. Loneliness isn't eased by exposing it to someone who no longer sees you with compassion. And when you tell an adult child that you're feeling lonely, hoping it'll bring you closer, you're only exposing your wound to a mirror that may no longer reflect tenderness. Maybe they'll feel uncomfortable. Maybe they'll feel guilty. Or worse, they'll listen with indifference. And that makes the wound deeper. Because there's no pain more cruel than revealing your need and having it met with nothing. What happens when you confess your loneliness isn't just that you don't get comfort. It's that, without realizing it, you begin to be seen as a burden. As someone who's always expecting something, who's demanding, who's inconvenient. And that image weakens you, not because feeling lonely is wrong, but because you're trying to fill that void from a place where the well has already run dry. And that not only frustrates you, it makes you dependent, emotionally fragile, trapped in a cycle where every silence feels like confirmation that you don't matter, that you're being left behind. But that's not true. You do matter, so much more than you think. You just might be looking in the wrong direction. Stoicism teaches that what is outside your control should not rule you, and that includes your children's presence or their absence. The company that doesn't come should not define your joy or your sense of purpose. Because if it does, you become a shadow of yourself, and no one respects that. Not them, not you. But you can change it. Not with complaints or emotional conversations that end in excuses. You can change it from within by changing the question. Instead of asking, "Why do they leave me alone?" ask yourself, "What can I create in this silence?" Because silence isn't always emptiness. Sometimes it's space to plant something new. A habit, a prayer, a walk, a different routine. Anything that reminds you that you're still alive, that you still get to decide, that you can still fill your time with meaning, even if no one else does it for you. It's not easy, I know, but it's possible. Loneliness can be hell if you stand in the middle of it, waiting for someone to come. But it can also be a temple if you choose to inhabit it with presence, with purpose. Not to resign yourself, but to restore yourself. To remember that you still have power. That not everything you need has to come from them. That you can be your own companion without losing hope for a healthier connection, but never begging for it again. Don't tell them you feel lonely. Show them that you're alive, that you breathe calmly, that you think clearly, that you walk with steady steps. That image, even if you don't believe it, has far more impact than 1,000 sad words. Because respect doesn't grow out of pity. It grows from seeing someone who, even in pain, holds herself together. And that is what stirs something in those who still have a heart. Stay with me, because there are still deeper wounds to explore. And each one of them can be a doorway, but only if you choose to walk through it with your eyes wide open. If loneliness shouldn't be confessed to someone who doesn't know what to do with it, then the next step is even more delicate. Because often, in an attempt to explain ourselves, to feel free, to be transparent, we end up giving more than we should. And this brings us to the sixth point in this journey, and I ask you to look at it head-on. Don't share the details of your past mistakes. Not everything you kept to yourself for years needs to be told now. Not every regret needs to become a story. Picture it for a moment. You're sitting in front of your adult child, not as a mother, but as a woman who's lived through decades. You decide to open up about something that's weighed on you for years. A poor decision, a toxic relationship you stayed in, a moment of weakness, an act of betrayal, emotional neglect, or something that still haunts you at night. You believe that saying it out loud will set you free, that by sharing it, they'll see you as more human, more relatable, more real. But the opposite happens. They hear you, but they don't understand. They look at you, but they don't really see you. Their expression shifts, and what was meant to be a confession becomes judgment, distance. Another reason to hold something against you the next time something goes wrong. So what's the point? Why hand yourself over like that to someone who isn't ready to see your story without turning it into a weapon? Because that's what often happens. If you share your mistakes without protection, they can become ammunition in future arguments, passive-aggressive silences, or even quiet contempt disguised as maturity. The truth is this: not every guilt needs a witness. Some need to be processed in silence, with God, with yourself, with the notebook where you write before bed. But not with your children, not unless the bond is solid, empathetic, evolved. Because without mature love, there won't be a net to catch you once the words have left your mouth. The problem grows when this pattern repeats. You share once, then again. And after that, every time there's tension, they bring it up, as if confessing your mistakes gave them a lifetime license to look down on you. That's not redemption, that's emotional submission, and you're not here for that. You've lived too much, survived more than anyone knows, to hand your story over to someone who will only use it to measure your flaws. It's hard to say, but it needs to be said. Many children aren't emotionally ready to understand who you are beyond the role you played. And if you flood them with details from your past, hoping they'll forgive or understand you, you might end up feeling even more alone. Because respect doesn't come from someone else's forgiveness, it comes from your own. From knowing that yes, you made mistakes, but you don't need anyone's absolution, just your own. This is the moment to shift your gaze, not outward, but inward. Ask yourself which parts of your story really need to be told and which can be allowed to rest in peace. Because some wounds heal better in the silence of the soul than in the noise of a poorly received conversation. Seneca said the wise don't apologize with words, but with a change in behavior. Maybe not in those exact words, but the message is clear. Live today with such integrity that your mistakes no longer need an explanation. If you don't make this cut now, you'll stay stuck in the same cycle, confessing to find relief and ending up emptier than before. And worse, you'll have handed your truth to someone who sees it not as a brave act, but as proof of weakness. Don't give that power to anyone. Your past belongs to you, and if you choose to share it, let it be because the relationship has earned it, not because it's burning a hole inside you. What's coming next will be even harder to face, but also more revealing. Because we haven't yet reached the most invisible point of all, the one where, without realizing it, you give away your dignity with words that sound like love, but are really rooted in fear. Stay with me, we're not done yet. We're not done. What we just covered is no small thing. Understanding that some truths must remain in silence because the other person isn't ready to hold them is a profound act of emotional maturity. But there's still one more thing you need to face, not with fear, but with courage. We've reached the 7th point in this journey, and it may be the most invisible, the most common, and also the most destructive. Don't share your future plans unless you're ready to defend them. Because when you speak about what you want to do, about your dreams, about the changes you hope for in this stage of life, but you do it with hesitation, waiting for approval, as if asking for permission, you're not projecting hope. You're handing over the wheel of your life to people who've already shown They don't always see you as a whole adult. Think for a moment about how many times you've said, "I want to travel, I want to learn something new, I'd like to move," or simply, "I just want more peace," and how those plans vanished into thin air after one disapproving comment. Sometimes it's a subtle joke, other times a condescending glance, or worse, an uncomfortable silence that makes you doubt yourself, and so you retreat. You put the plan on hold. You tuck the idea away. You convince yourself it's not worth it. But the truth is, the plan didn't fail. What failed was your conviction, the lack of inner strength that allowed someone to crush it before it even had a chance to live. This is what happens when you share your decisions without the strength to hold them. You're not looking for companionship, you're looking for validation. And that, in later life, is a dangerous kind of self-deception. Because every time you silence a desire out of fear that others won't understand it, you're teaching them that your life is negotiable. And it's not. You weren't born to be a passive observer of other people's opinions about you. There's no room here for excuses. If you say you want something, go for it. Or at the very least, start building the inner strength so that when you do speak it, no one dares to dismiss it. Because the problem isn't that you have dreams, it's that you toss them into the air like a coin, hoping it lands the right way. And that's how respect dissolves. Because if you don't defend your path, you'll end up walking someone else's. Real transformation doesn't come when everyone supports you. It comes when you decide that, with or without permission, with or without applause, you are going to move forward. You're going to choose. You're going to live on your own terms. Because this is your life. And it doesn't matter how much time is left. What matters is how you live it. And that, I promise you, doesn't come from begging for approval. It comes from owning every word that leaves your mouth, not as a question, but as a declaration. This point isn't just a warning. It's a threshold. Because if you dare to cross it, if you decide that from now on, whatever you say will be backed by resolve, then respect starts to return. Not their respect, which is never guaranteed. Your own. And that changes everything. Your decisions, your body, your spirit. But it all begins when you stop talking about your dreams like you're asking for permission and start declaring that life, even now, is still yours. And that's something no one has the right to question. If the last chapter left you reflecting on how many times you've silenced your dreams out of fear of not being validated, then what comes next should push you into action. Because it's not enough to recognize the pattern, you have to break it. And for that, we arrive at the 8th point in this video. Don't tell them that you don't know what to do without them. That phrase, even if it feels like an expression of love, is actually a sentence of emotional dependence. Every time you say it, you shrink in front of them. You position yourself as someone without direction. And if you have no direction, don't expect respect. This isn't harsh poetry, it's reality. If you're the one declaring that your life loses meaning without your children's presence, then you're not speaking from love. You're speaking from emptiness. And that emptiness, when expressed with such fragility, doesn't evoke tenderness in the one hearing it. It stirs discomfort. It creates distance, because no one wants to feel responsible for someone else's soul. And when you say, "I don't know what to do without you," you're placing a weight on them that isn't theirs to carry. The result is harsh. Either they pull away, or they stay out of guilt, or they stay physically but not emotionally. And in any of those scenarios, you're still alone. But now, also powerless. What you need to do now is simple, but challenging. Erase that phrase from your life. Delete it from your vocabulary, your thoughts, your conversations, because it's not true. You do know what to do without them. Maybe you've forgotten what it feels like to decide for yourself. But you did it for years. You raised a family, You solved problems, you fought, you built. And now you're going to say you don't know? It's not a lack of knowledge, it's a lack of conviction. And that's what you need to get back. Starting today, every time you feel the urge to say that phrase, replace it with an action. Just one gesture that affirms your existence without conditions. It can be something small, cooking your favorite meal without waiting for anyone to share it, going for a walk without telling anyone, buying something just for you. But do it with presence. Do it as someone building her life from affirmation, not absence. And you'll see how little by little your posture changes. Not because they recognize it, but because you start to see yourself differently. And when that happens, everything starts to shift. The mindset you need to hold this change is simple. Own that your well-being is no one's responsibility but your own. Not your children's, not your grandchildren's, not your past's, yours. It always has been. And if you're living from dependence today, you can still get out. Not with pretty words, but with firm decisions. Because what you say shapes the reality you live in. And if you keep telling yourself you can't do it alone, you're signing your surrender. But if today you choose to change that narrative, even with one small act, then you're reclaiming your place. Not as an eternal mother, not as an emotional victim, but as a woman who, even after all the sacrifices, can still stand up and say, I'm here, and my life is still mine. There's one last truth left, and it's the hardest of them all, but it could also be the most liberating. Stay with me, because if you've come this far, it's not to stop halfway. It's to finish this journey with your head held high and your soul wide awake. You've made it this far, facing truths that many spend their whole lives avoiding. You've recognized patterns, forms of dependence, phrases that seemed harmless but quietly eroded your dignity. And now it's time to close this journey with the most uncomfortable lesson of all. The 9th point in this video doesn't mince words. Don't share your future plans unless you're ready to defend them. Because if you do it without conviction, you're not stepping into your power. You're just decorating your resignation with pretty words, and that changes nothing. It only hides the fear. I know it's hard. At this age, new ideas feel more fragile. You often think, why start now? I don't have time. I don't have the energy. They won't support me. But stop for a moment. All those things you keep repeating, they're not truths. They're excuses dressed up as wisdom. They're mental strategies you've built to avoid facing the emptiness left by a life lived without authorship. Because making a firm decision isn't just saying, I'm going to do it. It's holding on to that decision when no one claps. It's walking alone if necessary. It's withstanding judgment, criticism, mockery, or silence. And that, as you know, takes more courage than physical strength, more clarity than youth. The trap is thinking you can talk about your plans without paying the price of living them, that you can say you want to travel, study, move, set boundaries, start something new without making anyone uncomfortable. But anything worthwhile will make people uncomfortable. It unsettles those who want you to stay still. It unsettles those who relied on you as an emotional crutch. It even unsettles your own beliefs. And that's where many stop, waiting for the path to become clear on its own, waiting for the world to align with their desires. But that won't happen if you don't take the first step, if you don't affirm what you want with the voice of someone who's chosen to live. No one else will do it for you. You don't need to have it all figured out to begin. What you need is to stop justifying your paralysis. Stop saying, when I have more money, when my son understands, when this phase passes, because life won't wait. And if you don't make the change now, you'll do it later when you have no choice. But then you'll do it without strength, without direction, without purpose. And that's not freedom, it's desperation. Your age isn't a limitation, it's a filter. By now, you know who you are. And if you don't, it's because you've never asked yourself honestly. This is the moment to do it. To admit that if you're not living the life you want, it's because something inside you is still obeying an old script, a fear unresolved, a guilt that was never yours to carry. Today you have the chance to write a new chapter, not one that needs to be shouted, but one that can be felt in your footsteps, in your gaze, in the way you walk around your home, in how you sit down to eat alone without sadness, in how you look in the mirror without seeking approval. But that doesn't happen with speeches or dreams. It happens when you decide, and once you decide, you defend it. You don't need permission. You need courage. The rest, trust me, comes later. Because the woman who stands in her truth may make others uncomfortable at first, but in the end, she is respected. And that kind of respect, once regained, is never lost again. Stay for the closing. What I'm about to tell you isn't a summary, it's a calling, one that only those ready to live with truth will be able to hear. If you've made it this far, it's not out of curiosity or for entertainment. It's because, deep down, you know something needs to change. That repeating the same gestures, the same phrases, the same silences no longer makes sense. Because what's at stake isn't just a good relationship with your children or a peaceful old age. What's at stake is your identity, your worth, your right to live this stage of life without emotionally kneeling before anyone. What I've shared with you today isn't meant to comfort you, it's meant to wake you up. Because real transformation doesn't begin with sweet words, but with the discomfort of a truth you can no longer ignore. Very few people make it to the end of something like this, not because they don't need it, but because they're not ready to hear what truly challenges them. You are, and that deserves respect. So I want to invite you to leave two things in the comments: the country you're watching from and the phrase, "I no longer give away my power." That declaration isn't symbolic, it's an affirmation, it's an act, and by writing it, you're making it clear that what you've learned today won't be tucked away as just another idea, but will mark a before and after in how you choose to live. I'm Gabriel, and this is the Stoic Garden. This channel doesn't exist to entertain you or offer easy encouragement. It exists to give you direction when everything else feels unclear, to say what others won't, to look at you without condescension, and remind you that this stage of life can be fertile, dignified, and fulfilling, but only if you stop waiting for approval and start building from your truth. This space is for women who refuse to beg for presence or respect. It's for those who've chosen to wake up. If this content stirred something in you, if you felt that you needed to hear this today, subscribe. And not just to keep watching videos. Subscribe like someone joining a community that has chosen not to live numbed. And if you know someone who needs to hear these words, a friend, a sister, a woman who's starting to dim, share it with her. Sometimes, a truth said at the right moment can change a whole life. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning. On screen, you'll see two videos I invite you to watch next, not to collect more words, but to continue walking this path of clarity you've already begun. Because every conscious step you take is a victory against resignation, and you're not here to give up. You're here to reclaim what fear and habit once stole from you. I'll see you in the next video, but more importantly, I'll see you in every firm decision you make from this day forward.